Are you ready for fear? And are you ready to taste it? If so, you might be ready for Taste of Fear. Before I get into it, I'll quickly say that you'll find all my other Hammer reviews in my Hammer playlist. So this is a story about a young woman called Penny who is paralysed from the waist down, and one day her best friend dies by suicide, so you could say that Penny's not having the best run of it. To cheer her up, her dad invites her to go and stay with him and his new wife in France. Penny accepts, so she travels all the way across the channel, which is not easy for her given the fact that she's in a wheelchair, but she manages it. But when she arrives, her dad, it turns out, has mysteriously gone away on a business trip. And this being 1961, there's no technology for Penny to just message her dad and say, look, are you all right? Are you definitely on a business trip? Can't do that. So all she can do is sort of wait at the house to see if he turns up. But of course, it doesn't take us, the audience, very long, and Penny herself, to realise that her dad may have been the victim of foul play, possibly at the hands of his new wife, or maybe the maid, or the butler, or maybe even the strange doctor who seems to hang around the house a lot. So this is a kind of thriller whodunit. It stars Susan Strasbourg, Ronald Lewis and Todd, and to my surprise, Christopher Lee. I didn't actually realise he was in this until the day that my Blu-ray arrived, and I sort of unwrapped it and was like, oh, Christopher Lee's in this. Yeah, at the time of purchase, I think I was in a little bit of a hurry. I was just kind of like, right, next Hammer film, oh, Taste of Fear, fine, basket purchase, booked it, packed it. But Christopher Lee's role in this is quite minor by his usual standards. The size of his part is kind of similar to the one he had in The Man Who Could Cheat Death, I suppose. This was at a stage of his career where he was still finding his way. He talks with a French accent in this film, which is kind of weird. I didn't even notice that he was doing it for his first few sentences because he speaks in quite a soft tone. He does it very well, although I think the words that he uses are a little bit too sophisticated. I mean, this Dr. Gerard would have had to have spent half of his life living in England to be able to talk like this. I found the maid character a more believable French person, but that's more an issue with the script rather than anything that Christopher Lee's doing. He actually regards this as one of his very best Hammer films, which is high praise indeed, given all those amazing gothic horrors that he was in. But I guess from his point of view, he's more likely to look back on a film like this with great fondness than, say, a movie where he spends the entire duration wrapped in bandages or lying in one of Baron Frankenstein's flotation tanks. Taste of Fear is officially a thriller, but it's also part horror. I mean, the story plays like a thriller, but when you see Penny wheeling herself around this large house at night and we get jump scares and the atmosphere's all dark and foreboding, we've very much been transported into a horror at that point. So if you're the sort of person who doesn't tend to touch thrillers, I wouldn't avoid Taste of Fear for that reason. This is definitely a bit of both in my book. Susan Strasbourg it is who plays Penny, and how I've never heard of this actress before, I don't know. I was besotted with her within about 3 minutes of the opening. Not only is she gorgeous, but the way that she plays this character, Penny, I mean, she's as cool as a cucumber throughout this movie. Susan Strasbourg has to be a stage name, though, doesn't it? I mean, I can just imagine her sat at the dining room table when she was about 15 going, Susan Monaco? Susan Marseille. Oh, Susan Strasbourg. The S of Strasbourg will go with the Susan. There's a nice bit of symmetry there. I don't know. It might be a real name for all I know. There's an early scene in this where she's being driven away from the airport that she lands in France, and she's wearing sunglasses, I think, in the back of the car, and she just looks so much like Katharine Hepburn from Breakfast at Tiffany's. I've not even seen that film, but throughout my life, I have seen various stills in magazines, especially that famous one where she's looking into the window of a jeweller's, maybe. But funnily enough, after I'd watched Taste of Fear, I went onto the wiki page of Susan Strasbourg, and one of the first lines I read was, Susan Strasbourg was one of the Katharine Hepburn type actresses from the early 60s. I thought, yes, I was totally on point with what I thought when I was watching this movie. Looking at her filmography, I don't think she quite went on to have the most amazing of careers, and I know this as well from listening to the guy who does the audio commentary track for Taste of Fear. She did go on to be in a couple of films that I've seen. Bloody Birthday from 1981. I'm going to have to watch that again now. I'd be fascinated to see Strasbourg 20 years further on. And also, bizarrely, she was one of the plane passengers in Delta Force. Now, I love that movie, but I've not seen it in ages, so I can't picture her on the plane. Though I do wonder if she was the Jewish wife whose husband has to go to the front of the plane and it's presumed that he's going to be killed and the daughter gets all upset. I don't know, I'm going to have to revisit it. Moving on, Ronald Lewis plays Robert, the butler slash handyman who hangs around the estate in this film. Ronald Lewis was also in a Hammer film called The Full Treatment, which came out in 1960, so just 12 months earlier. He played a very different character in that, but The Full Treatment was also set in France, so I kind of wonder whether he might as well have just stayed in France between these two movies, though of course the movies might not necessarily have been filmed in France. I'm not going to talk about the big twist today. I probably should have said this at the start of the review. One of the biggest reasons why I'm not going to talk about it is because it's so good. I mean, the twist in this is absolutely amazing. It's one of the best I've ever seen in a movie. It's the Usual Suspects level of quality when it comes to twists. It really is. I actually guessed it quite early. Well, not guessed it. I briefly considered it as an outside possibility and then I instantly dismissed it because I thought to myself, oh no, they wouldn't do that. So an hour or so later, when the twist finally got revealed, I had long eradicated that possibility from my brain. So it still really surprised me and hit me out of nowhere. And I was like, "Whoa, wow, that is absolutely brilliant." I also like the soundtrack. This is one of the best soundtracks from a black and white thriller of this particular time period that I've ever heard. And one of the reasons for that is because the music is so sparse. It often feels when I'm watching this sort of film that I've got an orchestra in my ear the whole time. It's a little bit grating, but the director of this quite wisely has a lot of silence when Penny is just moving around the house, exploring. And when we do get some music in this, it's actually pretty good, to be fair. I also like the location. I don't think they used an actual large house to film this in, except from when they're doing shots from the outside. I think they constructed a set for all the rooms that you see on the inside, but they're very well filmed. I mean, there are several rooms in the house that we have to go to over and over, but the director seems to approach them from different angles each time. That there's like a courtyard or something out back that Penny has to go through several times throughout the movie, but we always seem to be looking at her movements through an entirely different camera angle every single time. We don't ever see the courtyard the same way twice. It's really clever. It sort of keeps you really disorientated throughout the movie, puts you a little bit into the mind of Penny somewhat, and in terms of how she would feel exploring this really dark, creepy place. We also get some really scary reveals of dead bodies. I'm not going to say too much about that. There's one in a swimming pool in particular, which sort of maybe do a little bit of a start. In terms of negatives, I've only really got one, which is the casting of Anne Todd as the stepmother type figure. And I can't really say why without getting into the twist at the end, but I think they should have gone with somebody maybe 10 years younger or maybe even 5 years younger. And actually, Anne Todd herself once went on record as saying that she didn't really like this film. So Christopher Lee absolutely loves it. Anne Todd doesn't like it at all. I think she just maybe didn't like the story, or maybe she just thought to herself that she was possibly miscast. She also didn't get along with Susan Strasbourg, apparently, which I just find crazy. I mean, how can you not get along with Susan Strasbourg? I could easily imagine that Susan Strasbourg is just one of the most easy persons to ever get along with. So I guess we've reached that point where I show you the version of the film that I have for this. I've got an Indicator Blu-ray, Indicator for my money, at least as good as Arrow. The presentation of the film on this disc is absolutely immaculate. Audio, visuals, absolutely spot on. Got no complaints in that department. There's a massive amount of features as well. You won't be able to read them from there, but you can see how thick the list is. It tells you how long each feature is as well, and it must add up to about 7 or 8 hours of content. It's a hell of a lot for a really old black and white film from the early 60s. Out of all that stuff, I've only watched the audio commentary so far. It was done by a guy called Kevin Lyons, who apparently was the editor of the Encyclopedia of Fantastic Film and Television. I've never heard of him or that book, but he does a really good track with this. He's very knowledgeable and excitable about the film. He's not blind to the occasional flaw that you could pick up on when it comes to watching Taste of Fear. Commentary tracks tend to be hit and miss. This one's definitely a hit with me. I also noticed on the features list that there's a 2-hour interview with Jimmy Sangster. I mean, I love Jimmy Sangster and his work, but I mean, 2 hours? You want to listen to him for that long? Is he talking about Taste of Fear that whole time, or his career in general? It'd be fascinating to know. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score we're going to give for this movie. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bloody axes out of 5, and let me tell you, it was not far off 4.5. That is an excellent score for an excellent film. This was way better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be, you know, a pretty decent Hammer thriller, and then we move on to the next one. But I can easily see this becoming one of my favourite ever Hammer thrillers. It's really, really good. If you like something like Psycho from 1960, there's no reason why you wouldn't also enjoy Taste of Fear from just 1 year later. It's sort of that ilk, and I can see a little bit why Christopher Lee would claim that this is the best Hammer film he's ever been in. I'm not sure I would go that far, but it's certainly got to be up there. It's truly, truly superb, and I'm glad I've discovered it. Right, I'll be back very soon with another Hammer review. Until next time, cheerio.